good evening. My name is Chelsea and I'm one of the assistant curators here at ACMI. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and the elders from other communities who might be here today. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you here all tonight to Art and Film. It's our Art+FILM. It's our first one for the year, so we're very excited. We have actually partnered, as you know, with Midsumma and QueerTech for this event. We will be showcasing a collection of shorts from QueerTech's IRL and URL exhibition, which can still be viewed online on their web portal or at RMIT. Please stick around after the screening because we have a fantastic panel of artists who will be joining us for a Q&A. And also this room is fantastic, but it's a little bit funny. We have some strange doors here. So if you do need to exit at any point, if you wouldn't mind just coming out this door, there's a push to open that door. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Kylie Breeze and Dr. Travis Cox, who will tell you a lot more about the Midsumma and QueerTech project. Please enjoy the films.
Good evening. My name's Kylie. I'm from Midsumma. I suspect many of you in the room are fairly familiar with the festival. We're very excited to partner with ACMI and QueerTech.io for this evening and the partnership of a really amazing piece. I'm getting towards the end of the 22-day beautiful festival that Midsumma is, where this year we've had close to 180 events. Apparently we've had near 200,000 people attend our events over the festival, and we still have a couple more days to go. So I hope that you can get to some more of our events. I'm really excited about this particular piece. I think it's rather unique, and it's close to me because I'm happy to see us move in different directions with really talented artists that we already have a great relationship with. So enjoy this evening. Think about some questions as we go through. I'm sure you'll be prompted to as we go. And thanks for attending.
Hi everyone, my name's Travis. I'll be super quick so we can just get to watching some stuff and then we can all have a chat about it. But Alison just asked me to give a quick introduction to QueerTech.io and the project as a whole. So QueerTech.io, this is the second year that it's run. We have a curatorium, which is currently made up of Xanthi Dobby and Alison Bennett and myself. We also have some other members who've worked with us before, including Mark Payne, who may be here. I'm not sure if he is. No. And Daniel as well from Midsumma, who's been really fantastic. We started QueerTech.io because we wanted to use the internet that is this tool in a very kind of utopic sense that allows you to connect and to collaborate across spaces. Everyone kind of within the curatorium are really interested in collaboration and what other people bring to yourself and how you can become bigger than the sum of your parts. And we wanted to kind of explore, well, how is the internet kind of connecting with these people all across the world, all these queer artists? How is it allowing them to engage with issues in different ways, with themselves, with their communities, with the larger world? And to then kind of bring it all together into one place, not as a way of kind of aligning them, but instead showing the disparate natures of the ways that people do engage with technology and the ways that queer people engage with technologies. So there's this real community aspect to the work that I was watching Laurel Beckman's work, Stonewall in My Navel, that we'll actually see in a few minutes. And they actually say at one point in their artist statement that celebration and protest are not mutually exclusive. And that really struck me in the way that we try and approach QueerTech and the way it's curated as well, is that it is a celebration and it is about the different ways that people are engaging with these technologies and engaging with their identities. But there is also an aspect of protest to it, as I'm sure a lot of you feel. The very act of being a queer person is a protest in a lot of ways. You're constantly putting yourself out there in a way that is against the norm, and that can be a really kind of difficult thing sometimes, but it can also be something that can be really celebrated. So the works all do that in different ways, and it's really exciting to see such a great collection, and I'm really excited to kind of share a selection with you tonight. I will say that please do jump on the website, queertech.io, because this is a small selection of the works, and a lot of these works are video-based as well. While on the website you'll find video games, you'll find interactive artworks, you'll find a queer AI, you'll find a lot of different ways that people are using technology to explore these ideas. So, oh, and a very special one tonight that you won't find on the website is, of course, Fa'afa by Paddy Solomon-Terrell. This is a very exclusive screening of that work, and we're really thankful to Paddy for allowing us to screen it tonight. So, without further ado, I'm going to be quiet and sit down, and I hope you all enjoy this selection from queertech.io. Thank you.
Hi, welcome. Thank you. I wanted to, first I should introduce myself. I'm Alison Bennett. I'm a new media artist. I'm also work at RMIT School of Art. And over here is Travis Cox, who's also a member of the Queer Tech Curatorium, Xanthi Dobby, and at the very end we've got Sabella D'Souza. And via video from London, we've got Tia Borman, is that correct?
Tia Bauman.
Tia Bauman, welcome. Let me just find my notes to give a proper introduction. There we go. Okay. So Tia is the CEO and founder of the Metaverse Makeovers. You saw the advert, the Chinese advert earlier on in the program. It's the world first international hologram brand focused on augmented reality fashion and immersive experiences. It's an interdisciplinary team based in Melbourne, Hong Kong, Shanghai and London. And Tia's currently completing her master's in the National Film and Television School in the UK on femme-identifying directors and founders working in the vanguard of immersive media. Sabella has joined us from Sydney. She's a performance artist whose work interweaves notions of cultural hybridity, virtual identity, along with the transnationality of cyberspace. And their research looks at how specific websites like Periscope, YouTube and Twitter are used in identity construction with reference to their own diasporic and queer identity. I actually wanted to turn to, I'm going to come back to my curatorium in a moment, but I wanted to talk to Sabella first and then ask some questions of Tia. We talked the other day about the notions of technology as being more than just digital. It incorporates gesture, makeup, discourse, even hormones in some cases. I wonder if you could sort of talk us through a little bit that in relation to your work that we've just seen, the way that you've performed gesture and makeup, yeah?
So I guess that's very close to me. With 22 Female Australia, I was kind of looking at the way in which makeup and really specifically looking at the gestures of YouTube makeup beauty tutorials and how they kind of work to form identities and how that identity can be taken from that online space into physical spaces. I'm very much interested in kind of that brown identity and how in online space specifically that is kind of nullified and looked at as inherently white. So like anonymity on the internet, you see an anonymous comment, it's like, oh, that's a white person. It's just kind of the way that your brain kind of automatically considers the cyberspace to be white by default. And so a lot of my work is kind of unpacking how that can sometimes be a safe space for people. So like you can kind of go into cyberspace and remain anonymous and that can be really safe for a lot of people, but you can also do the complete opposite and self-identify and in some ways find communities by self-identifying. So a lot of my research kind of came from like autonomous Facebook groups and things like that, and subreddit and things, and the ways in which those kinds of communities are created in these very hostile environments sometimes.
Okay. As we've talked about a number of times, we see, although we're interested in internet art, that we see technology as being much broader. Was that something that you were conscious of when you were making works like that? Do you think through, like, you're interested in the internet, but you're also interested in the way that using makeup as a way of performing a certain idea?
Yeah, like I think I never made a work being like, I want to make a work about I want to make a post-net work or post-internet work. It was always kind of trying to understand my own kind of experience, and a lot of my experience just happens to be in a transnational cyberspace. That is, I think that the internet's this really interesting thing. It's a space, as in it's a social construct and you can talk about it, but it's also in some ways a physical place in which you can meet and create communities. And so I wanted to really not just talk about the social construct that is the internet, but also talk about the communities that are formed in those spaces.
And what about the sort of the queer dimension of that? How do you think about the internet as a queer space?
Yeah, so I definitely think that as I've been kind of doing more research myself, I've been looking at the ways in which women, non-binary, people of colour utilise the internet to self-identify, create it's called virtual home place, and it's originally coined, it's based off the bell hooks' term home place, which is like a site of resistance and a site of coming home to a space and getting energy and comfort that you might not necessarily find in other spaces. And then Latoya Lee is an academic who coined the term virtual home place, which is about the ways in which we're kind of looking towards, especially queer and brown identities are looking towards the internet in a similar mannerism to find their home place, to find their community that they might not necessarily find in physical spaces.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was certainly part of our motivation for creating Queer Tech, was we wanted to create our own space in our own room and put ourselves at the centre of that.
Yeah.
So it's been really lovely to build that community around that. I might turn, that segues to Tia quite nicely. Tell us a little bit about how you developed the idea of metaverse makeovers, metaverse nows.
Yeah, well, I guess the idea came to me when I used to hang out a lot in nail parlors in Vietnam. And I used to see girls playing Candy Crush and getting their nails done at the same time. And I was like, why don't I put games on girls' fingers? Like, how would I power up girls with games and have holograms, like crystal gems, fly out of their fingers? And so that's really where the idea stemmed from, was like literally hanging out in nail parlors in China and Vietnam and seeing this very networked culture that existed. It's very mobile enabled beauty culture. And so from there, I was like, literally, how do I make a new type of wearable platform that could distribute my girl content, and where would I put it, and how do I build it? And from that point there, I just kind of engineered the idea backwards. It was a bit of reverse engineering over time. But we started with like QR codes, kind of very basic AR marker as nail decals, and then evolved the technology from that point, and ended up designing more artist-made, I guess, press-on nails, which could interact with an app. And then we started building those apps with games technology, Unity, to create more complex interactive experiences that would literally fly out of your nails. So I guess it really started from a place of my own understanding, as I'm like half Vietnamese myself. So it was really like, how do I augment my own culture really with the newest virtual hologram technology, and how can I literally give it to my community? Yeah.
Tia, when we were talking earlier, I mentioned that part of what interests me about your use of augmented reality is the notion of the queer concept of prosthesis, the way that queer culture and queer theory often embraces the idea of augmenting the body. Was that something that you've come across in your thinking, in your development of the project?
Yeah, well, I've always viewed my brand as like a wearable technology brand or wearable holograms. So holograms that you can wear and share and would like power you up. So power you up with the metaverse. And I guess like I used to watch like a lot of cyberpunk films and anime and manga and like Sailor Moon and Gem and the Holograms. And I think that kind of like incepted my brain, like my young brain, like Cronenberg films of like this post-human body where you could connect to this cybernetic space. And for me, I guess like the nails, and I'm like pushing it across into fashion now, but I always viewed them as this like key to the metaverse. Like you could wear this technology and it would unlock this girl virtual universe. It was like a femme-made matrix, so to speak. And so that's how I built the brand, was that, you know, amongst all of the new emerging virtual reality social media networks that are being built out there, you know, Facebook's social VR worlds and all that, I was like, I don't want that to be the only way we can engage with this new metaverse virtual universe. Like there must be a way to create a truly femme version of this, and a way we can experience this that is autonomous to that. So, I mean, yeah, that's the driver behind it, really.
When we first saw your submission for Queer Tech, I should explain, we put together Queer Tech each year from a call for works, and we go through as a curatorium and pick out submissions, the ones that we sort of feel like will put together a good collection. When we first viewed your trailer, the rest of the curatorium were like, is this a real project? And I'm going, yeah, it's a real project, it's a real thing.
Just existing as an ad.
Yeah.
The ad is gorgeous. That was designed for the Chinese market, is that right?
Yeah, it was designed for the Chinese market. So it is actually a product. Like I call them accessories. So they're like fashion accessories that interact with the AR app. So it is actually a commercialized product. It is on the market as a new product category. It's patent pending.
That's great.
But yeah, it actually exists.
It's a real thing.
So it's out there, and you can buy it. And I guess, yeah, it's for the Asian market. Purely for like pitching purposes, I say it's for like the female mobile market. But I mean, generally, you know, I've always seen it sitting in this like new transnational space as well. Like I don't really see it purely being like for the Chinese market. I mean, I manufactured it in China, and the China market is huge. They do buy a lot of sparkly nail products, but I kind of see it as this like product that's even made for a new human in a way, or a new female or whatever, new mobile market. It's not really like China market. It's actually for new humans, really.
Look, it also appeals to us in terms of our interest in the sort of collapse between the virtual and the so-called physical, that it doesn't really it brings those two together in a really interesting way. I might throw to Travis and Xanthi. Have you got any things you want to sound off about right now?
Sound off about
Yeah,
right
what do you
now.
got?
Oh my God.
That's a dangerous thing to say, I know, with Xanthi.
Oh, Lord, Alison, I've been talking all week. I've been talking a lot about that sort of divide of on and offline space, and I think that this is actually quite an interesting selection of people that we've sort of thrown together for this particular panel, because we all address that in very different ways within our practices. But it's actually really exciting. It just occurred to me, the cohesion in this panel. Really should have thought about that over the many months that we've been planning this instead. So in regards to my practice, I mean, I deal a lot with sort of ideas of online identities. The series that is shown as part of this particular rendition of Queer Tech is called 21st Century Greatest Hits Screensaver Pack. You didn't get to see any of it tonight, but it is around. It's somewhat ubiquitous. It's in the Midsumma Post Art Prize at the moment at QV, actually. I think that closes tomorrow if you want to go and check it out and get a screensaver for your home. But essentially, the project is intended to kind of archive contemporary queer experience. So it kind of retrospectively looks back at what was happening in each year from 2000 to now, using the Pantone colours of the year as sort of base cultural signifiers, which then permeate out into fashion and architecture and design and all of these different things that we don't really realise are happening. And then it sort of cherry picks in a very biased way based on my specific interests and like the Time top 100 things of the year list that I've consumed while researching for this project, and sort of smashes them together in this biased femme queer history way. And it's sort of that on and offline thing, and then you're supposed to sign up to my mailing list, of which I have no purpose for currently, but I'll figure out how to spam you later. And you can install it in your home. So it's sort of trying to deconstruct that idea of the white cube and bring art into a different sort of banal home context. And the whole thing's set up as sort of a real weird, depressing office kiosk at an exhibition hall sort of thing. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yes. Which is fabulous.
How about you, Travis?
Where's Travis at? We've been talking about the way that the technology is such a Eurocentric, white, heterosexual paradigm. As queer artists, how do we begin to sort of negotiate that space?
Yeah, that's right. It's something that I'm really interested in my background is in the arts and human-computer interaction. So coming at the arts from a computer science perspective and being really aware of the kind of the structures that have built the technologies that we use in our everyday lives. I'm sure everyone here is across a lot of these kind of spaces, and understanding that how we approach a technology, how we approach the computer, even now, of course, with things like machine learning, who are the people that are building these technologies? Who are the people that are defining these algorithms? And how does that then impact the way that we can consume these technologies? And how can artists and how can queer artists who are working with technology start to subvert or question or bring to the fore some of these ideas of who's actually in control here, and what decisions do we not even get to make because of the way these technologies are structured? And I mean, Sabella kind of touched on some of this stuff as well. Obviously, with the internet is kind of a white space because it was created by kind of white people, and it's kind of defined in this very specific way. And how can we kind of question that normalization, and how can we make these kind of spaces truly democratic and truly open to all? Yeah.
Can we?
No. No. We can try. We can try.
It's also, from my point of view, it's about also finding what the limits of the affordances are of the technology. And often the limits of the affordances are actually different from the cultural processes that have been set up around them. Megan and I discovered that when we were working on the virtual reality project, that the team the office we were working in had very specific ideas about this is how you make the work, and we're going, no, we're not going to do it that way. So I think what we were exploring was a queer methodology. So Megan and Mark and myself, we sort of developed our own sort of quite sort of quirky process that broke all the rules in terms of how you're supposed to make this kind of work. So I guess that's sort of, it's not just what the technology can do, it's also the cultural expectations of the way you're supposed to use the technology. Tia, what's your experience of introducing your product into other cultures other than Australia?
Well, it's been pretty challenging, I gotta say. I mean, most people aren't really early adopters of hologram technology, AR, VR. So you really have to start from scratch when you're explaining that this is a new type of product that augments your body with holograms. But, you know, I've always tried to localize my messaging when I've introduced it to Asian cultures or China or Korea or Japan, you know, really trying, I mean, I don't really like the word Pan-Asian, but I guess, you know, my brand aesthetic and the language has a certain Pan-Asian quality about it, that it, you know, sits beyond borders, or it sits beyond these kind of clear territories, geographic territories of where Asia is or to the world, or it's kind of sits and hovers above all of that. It's more like a liquid world. But yeah, it's always been very, very challenging trying to explain the brand, the products, the technology. I think maybe it's just being a little bit too future forward can be incredibly challenging, and just waiting for the world to catch up. I mean, I was, introducing this product to the market well before Pokemon Go was a thing, and also before Snapchat started doing AR filters. But now that that's hit, I think it's been a lot easier to explain what I do. So it's just kind of waiting at the edges for everyone else to catch up, really.
Sabella, do you want to jump in on that? How do you go on? Sorry, I had a question that's gone. I'm just going to throw to... Sorry.
I actually do remember using your product in here, like
Fantastic.
3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember when it was, but I remember, it was, as soon as I saw the ad before, I was like, oh, I was here with my friend Lily and we were using them, and it was some kind of, I can't even remember, it was like a promotional thing at the time.
Yep.
But I guess for my own kind of experience with, I've always had an interest in holograms and the way in which we can kind of augment bodies. And I think a lot of my work was about the way in which kind of augmenting my physical identity to match the kind of URL identity that was kind of placed upon me in this certain space.
That particular work was in the most recent rendition of the Digital Portrait Prize, right?
Yeah.
At the National Portrait Gallery, which
Yes.
is, of course, like an innately very white colonialist space.
I had a great time there.
Please tell us about that
I
experience.
went up, so it's in Canberra, which is not my favourite place, but I went and it was great. And they asked, I don't know, it was a really amazing experience because I got to have it in this massive institution, but the institution is inherently always a very white, cis, het, thin, whatever. It's always this very particular way that they show these works. And I went, and the guy who ended up winning, I can't remember his name, but I know he was like a 30-year-old straight white man.
No.
But he made a work about selfie culture, and like he had never taken a photo of himself. I believe personally that he's never taken a selfie in his entire life. And he was like, yeah, so I'm talking about selfie culture and like what that means. You see girls and young people on the street and they're taking photos on their phones and they're not looking at each other in the room. And I'm like,
Whoa, what a nuanced
I
thing
know.
to
I was so like, oh, great. I love this topic of conversation about selfie work because my work that I made before this was a similar kind of selfie kind of thing. And I just kind of think that a lot of people make work about selfies when they have no need or don't understand the political resistance that's within kind of not just selfies but self-representation. I find that like one of the most radical spaces at the top of an Instagram bio line is the way in which you choose to identify yourself and how you kind of want to
#influencer.
so important. But you know what I mean? Like that is a really important way of showing this is the identity that I want people to know, and this is how I'm going to find other people who are like me. So,
I think selfie culture can be quite radical. It's really important.
What's your Instagram handle, sorry?
gov.au. I want the government to pay me to have their URL back, but I won't.
Maybe I'll throw to the audience. Do we have questions you want to ask with our panel about the program or about their practice? If you don't have questions, I'm going to ask you questions. I think there's a hand up there.
Yes.
Yes.
How have you found your work out there?
Who would you like to throw that to? Let's start with Sabella and then Xanthi.
We'll work across.
We'll keep going. I have only ever made 2 artworks that I believe are artworks in my entire life, and that was that one and one that I made last year. And I've been at art school for 5 years. Hello. Welcome to the art world. It's great. I'm originally from Melbourne. I moved to I think that I've found that I've actually not really shown that much in Australia at all. I have shown in a lot of autonomous South Asian, transnational, brown queer groups across the UK and the US. One of the collectives, I did a thing called Zayn Malak Zinzabad. It's great. Had a picture of Zayn Malak's face on it, and it was by this art critique duo called The White Pube, which was making fun of the white cube. Hilarious. But I have found that a lot of my work is kind of, I don't know, I've made friends with people via the internet, and then they've been like, your work looks cool, or you seem cool, are you making something? And I'm like, yeah. And then we end up showing it somewhere, and it ends up being this really amazing thing. I actually did a show in Seattle last year, which was really amazing. I got to show in this small artist-run space, and we didn't let so the artist-run space had only ever had, I think, about 5% of the people who worked at the gallery, either as artists or as curators, be people of colour. It's just the quota that they had. And so I was part of the show where we let less than 5% of the audience be white. And then we got sued. We got a class action lawsuit against the gallery. Not me personally, but the gallery did.
That is so exciting.
I know. It was this woman writing in being like, I was discriminated against. And we were like,
Wow, you did not understand.
You did not understand. The work was literally, the show was literally called Quota. And it was literally we didn't even say you can't come in. We made people come up and fill out a form, and they could self-identify however they wanted, and depending on how they responded, we made them either enter or wait in line. And people waited in line for 3 hours. They could have left, but as soon as someone gets in a line, they're like, you know what, I've got to be here. I've got to see what's in this gallery.
Get in the room.
Yeah.
The work is just standing in the line. There's nothing in
I know.
the gallery.
I walked down Snapchatting it, being like, this is amazing. This is the best bit of work I've ever been a part of. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it has been difficult in times, but it's kind of finding your niches in the same way that you kind of find them online. You got to find your people, and then from there you can kind of, be in a wonderful institution like the National Portrait Gallery.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that it's based on those sort of random connections that you make, because literally the way that Sabella wound up being in this show is that we ran into each other at the tote, and I was like, I'm doing this project, you should probably be in it. And now here we are, very professionally with these swivelly mics. I personally, I don't know, I haven't really found it difficult to get my work out there because of the nature of my work being intensely palatable. What I have found it difficult to get done is being paid. People don't like paying for digital art because it's so broadly consumable. I think that I've also sort of harnessed the internet as a way to push my work out there, and being within a digital space kind of allows you to push into that international market in a way that is way easier than I would imagine it would be as a person that made anything vaguely tangible.
Yeah, have you ever tried to ship something that's 5 kilos across the ocean?
I have not.
I never have, but I've heard it's difficult
Yes,
and very expensive.
Yeah, instead you can just be like, I'm just going to WeTransfer you something. It'll be there in 2 hours.
You got Google Drive?
Send me a picture of the install. It's great. So I suppose the aim really is not about, getting the exposure. It's that age-old thing of artists are just working for exposure. It's well, I also have to eat. Would love to eat and, have shelter. But hey, I'm a privileged white girl. I'm going to be fine. I got to get it out there. Trying. It's going well so far. This project has done some crazy things in its young life. We've been all over the place somewhat randomly, but I suppose we're filling a very specific niche of sort of that intersection of queerness and digital culture from all of these cool international perspectives. So get in touch.
We had an interesting conversation with a radio announcer a few weeks ago where they were making a big deal about the fact that it's an international show, and I was kind of like, yeah, okay. It is an international show, but part of what's sort of driven this project has been the need to sort of be part of a conversation and to create a sort of our own community. And the fact that that's happened over the internet, the fact that someone is here or on the other side of the world is kind of immaterial. We've been having an ongoing conversation with Tia over the last couple of weeks as we've been preparing for today, and I know what time she gets up and what time she goes to bed. but it's not really, I do.
What time is it, Alison?
She's a very early riser. It's, no.
9 a.m. in the morning. It's not too bad.
Yeah, good. But yeah, given the choice, I wouldn't get up unless I had to. So the sense that there's this sort of much larger village that we're a part of through the internet is one of the nice things about doing a project like this. I was also going, in answer to your question, I guess we've kind of focused on internet art because it's a little bit like street art in that you get around the gatekeepers. You can start your own. It's very easy to set up a website, buy a URL address and launch it, and it can either do nothing or do lots of things. But for us, it's been about finding an audience and generating conversation. Travis?
I don't really have much to add to that. I think that's kind of about what I would say as well is I work very digitally, and I was very lucky to kind of find the right communities online, and that is the nice thing about the internet is that you're probably going to find someone.
Awful things about
Yeah.
the
Well,
internet, which we won't touch
One of the
on.
very good things, one of the few good things maybe about the internet is it does let you connect to a lot of different people and get around the gatekeepers and just try things out, you know, in a really kind of different way, in a way that's really kind of quick as well. So
We've been quite unapologetic about creating a utopian bubble for ourselves, and to sort of create a space in which we can work and connect with people in the way that we would like the world to be in our own particular space.
queertech.io believes in self-care, so create a bubble and live in it.
Yes. Any more questions? Jay, how are you doing?
Hey, great. I'm not tweeting.
Oh, right, excellent. This is Jay Rosenbaum, who's also got work on the website and has got a fantastic show, augmented reality show over at Gasworks as well. So thank you for being here. I'm delighted to have you part of our little village. Was there a hand with another question I saw?
Yeah, we've got another question down
yeah,
here.
and over here
and
as well.
another-
You mentioned before about a queer methodology
Yeah.
to start to make some decisions about the work. So I was wondering if you could expand a little more on that.
Well, I guess a queer methodology would be a disavow of process and organisation, like we were really very organic and much more sort of groupthink rather than having prescribed structures and milestones that we had to meet. It was, Megan, would you agree? It was very much a sort of an organic process where we sort of got in the room and thought, yeah, that works, that doesn't work, that will break, we'll push it till it breaks and then pull it back. Yeah. Tia, did you want to add something to that? How would you think about your methodology in terms of queerness?
Well, I always call it like femtech. It's not really queer tech, but it's a variant of it. But yeah, I mean, I've always kind of viewed as like hacking the Great Firewall. Like I did a lot of time in China to distribute my apps there, my hologram apps there, and to manufacture my like accessories. And it was always a different type of internet environment. I mean, it's, you know, fortress by the Great Firewall of China. So, you know, for me, it always felt like I was kind of like hacking from the outside to burrow my way in. And then when I was in, I was like this cybernetic virus that could unleash my holograms on China's mobile market. But I guess that's been my approach. I kind of always just see myself as actually just kind of a hacker, really. Just another like femtech hacker. That's it.
Just another one.
Everywhere.
I just on kind of queer methodologies, I just to kind of talk a bit more about that kind of definition. For me, I often kind of talk about how being a gay man and how that's kind of really changed the expectations of me as a person. And this kind of queer methodology and this way of kind of creating that sits outside of the norm is also how I kind of consider how I have been kind of lucky enough to live my life, which is that the dominant structures of the heterosexual ideal of what my life would be meeting a girl, getting married, buying a house, all those kind of things. Those weren't structures that were placed upon me, and therefore I had a lot more freedom to kind of decide how I wanted to live my life and to define the kind of the way that I was going to live in the world. And that's kind of a queer methodology, is the different limitations or ignoring the kind of the structures of a society, and instead the curatorium is so much about how queer people often deal with society as building a different community, building a different family, and finding new ways and new structures that allow you to work together more equally and in a different kind of way.
Yeah,
and
it is a very cool, equal process, the way that we go about things here at queertech.io. Yeah, I mean, I think that we've all sort of acknowledged what our strengths are, and we managed to work together very cohesively in that way. We kind of know which part of this project we're going to be dealing with, and then we have sort of an ongoing group chat, sort of endless. It's like we are constantly plugged into the group chat, and we just, send each other rainbows of affirmation every few minutes, and we're good to go. Here we are.
Yes. There was another question up the back.
My question is for Subella, the lovely lady here. When my friend was talking about like exposure before and trying to get your artwork out and things like that, and then you spoke about like quotas and things like that, I was wondering if you've ever had like issues of, like, say some other YouTubers or entertainers have had of tokenism, of being included, like, in especially predominantly white spaces, that you're kind of like advertised like on show, like, oh my God, she isn't white, like what? So yeah, I was wondering if you have ever had any experiences
definitely.
like that.
I think that's definitely something that happens all the time in any creative field, like to the point where you're like, I get it. And you kind of get these two choices where you are, well, there's more than two choices, but at the moment it always feels like there's two choices. And one of those two choices is to be in an autonomous, like all brown, all people of color, all queer group show. And then in some ways that queerness, your brownness becomes like a moot point. It's like, yeah, cool, they're brown, but what else is there, you don't look at a white artist and you're like, wow, this is about their immense privilege, like, I love this, like, but you look at a brown artist and you're like, yeah, this is maybe about, their life that they've experienced, and yeah, I don't know. And then the other option is working with a white artist and collaborating together, and then being like, are they getting more out of this collaboration by working with a brown artist? And being like, cool, we're so diverse than I am as a brown artist working with a white artist. And so in some ways you're kind of in this rock and a hard place where you want to be in this safe community, but you also feel like I deserve to also be in this inherently white space as well. And so sometimes the thing is the rejection of the institution and going into places like cyberspace, but even then those same structures still exist. So it's just, it's really fun. But it's just kind of, I guess, just trying to constantly find other people who are experiencing the same thing or trying to dismantle the same system in a different way.
I've heard this question of tokenism come up a number of times in my life the last couple of weeks. And I've also heard the other side of that is to think of it as platforming. So when you get given a platform, to take it. But I've also seen the discourse of tokenism also used as a way of not including people.
I have a really great example of this. There's a group in Sydney, and they're all cis and white, and they're all cis and white and thin and models, and they run an artist network.
We're not naming any names.
Not naming any names. Anyway, they have an FAQ page where people are like, oh, why don't you have any brown people? Why don't you have any trans people? Why don't you have any gender non-conforming people in as part of your group? And their response now is, we don't want to, like, this is the group we started with, and we don't want to add any more to it because that would be tokenizing. And so there's this huge argument of, like, should this very privileged group of people add another person in, and is that tokenizing to add, like, you know, have the, like, tokenized brown person, tokenized whatever person within that space. But then also at the same time, you're also denying the voice, you're denying them to be a leader in that space as well. And so I think, like, I don't know, I've been part of a lot of artist collectives where I've looked around and then realized that I was the only brown person, and then been like, I can stay, and if I stay, I'm going to fight a lot, and I need to find someone that's going to help me, and then I need to bring another brown person on board, or I can leave and start something else in my own kind of, but it's so much energy. So
Yeah.
it's kind of trying to navigate which ones you want to fight and which ones you want to walk away from.
Totally.
Yeah.
Another question? Any more questions? Maybe I'll ask you some questions. Wesley, I see you looking away. What did you make of the collection? Did you pick out any sort of themes, or which works did you enjoy?
Thank you. How does this work?
Yeah.
We're going to ask a question? All right.
Okay.
We'll keep talking.
I found it, the work's actually very diverse, actually, and fascinating for me. As I'm an emerging artist, I'm still in art school.
I
still
think
learning.
you're talking yourself down a little bit there.
Yeah.
We had a conversation a few months ago about internet art, and your work is mostly data projection so far.
Yep.
Is the internet as a distribution platform a place you'd be interested in exploring?
Yeah, I am. My current work is really geared towards the gallery space, but I'm interested in pushing it more towards that sort of virtual space as well.
Yep.
But I'm still trying to figure out ways of actually doing that. So,
Whilst I've got you, I've got a question.
yeah.
How do you navigate your queer identity through your work? I've seen some of your work has queer themes, but a lot of it's much more abstract and obscure. How does that show up for you?
That's something I'm actually trying to navigate within my own work, that I'm trying to figure out how I can apply my own queerness to my own work. I think my work is more universal in its themes rather than looking at queer identity per se.
Yep.
But that's something I actually struggle with a lot in my own work, is how can I use my own queerness or talk about queer themes in my work? Is it enough for me just being a queer person to make work and to identify myself as a queer artist?
Yep.
Or should I actually be talking about queer themes towards a queer audience? I'm not sure yet.
Part of
People are going to project your queerness onto your work regardless of what you do, so enjoy.
Yeah. I think that's one of the kind of the questions that constantly comes up for us as well, and it came up last year when we were sitting there looking at all the works that had come through the call out, and again this year is this
that was a
question
very
of-
interesting way to get to know these people. I was watching that call out. There was a lot of naked bodies the first year.
There was, yeah. Less this year. But that question always comes up of, so this is queer tech, so what does that mean? How do we kind of walk this divide between what is kind of a queer tech worthy artwork?
What even is queer? Like,
Well, that's
such an all-encompassing term.
Yeah. I always how I always approach when we're kind of looking at works and selecting works is that adage of, I know it when I see it. And to me, it's not about kind of work that may explicitly be about a queer identity, but there's something about these works, and that comes through, I think, from any kind of artist making those works.
I think that queer is more sort of like, I know it when I don't see it. Like, it's everything that exists outside of a cis heteropatriarchy. Everything beyond that is kind of queer.
Yep.
So we're just encompassing everything else.
And I think that's something that for me showed up in this year's collection, was that it's not about being gay, it's not about being homosexual, it's also about a much broader sort of outsider theoretical and political position beyond just sexual orientation.
Yeah, queerness is just whatever's beyond the norm, really.
It's a
It's an
critique
aesthetic,
of that,
it's a politics, it's an identity, it's a way of being,
Yeah.
all that.
I think that might be a good place to begin to wrap up, unless there's any other burning questions. in the room? No? All right, we might call it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. I've just been reminded that there's work currently on show at RMIT Gallery, not at the RMIT Spare Room Gallery, I should say, up on Cardigan Street. That's on until March. And it's a beautiful installation, thanks to Xanthi and helped by Ange over there. Thank you very much. So thank you for coming.
All right.
Yeah.